Time to check your bearings. Hey, I've got some news. Our friend Kris Sims from the Taxpayers Federation is on deck. What a pleasure to introduce her. Hey, Kris, nice to see you. Where are you today?
I'm in downtown Calgary. I'm actually talking to you from the Western Standard office. I've snuck into a corner office and barricaded the door.
Well, that's great. You'll have to say hi to them. We were just talking about the Western Standard, Nigel Hannaford, Jonathan Bradley, and Western Standard's done a great job throughout this campaign. And you know what? In 2015, when we covered the insurgent NDP and Sheila Gunnree published her book, The Destroyers, Rebel News was alone amongst independent citizen journalists. And along the way, look what happened. The movement has grown. Western Standard.news, Cian Bexty, an alumnus of ours with the Counter Signal, True North. So I like the fact that there is now a community of independent journalists. And I bet that suits you too, Kris, because of course, I don't know, you're a critic of all things government-y. And these days, most of the regime media, even if they say they're private and independent, their number one source of revenue for any newspaper in this country, the number one source of revenue for every radio and TV station in this country is Justin Trudeau. And don't tell me that doesn't make a difference.
It makes a huge difference. And as a longtime journalist in both mainstream and I don't know, were we kind of mainstream at Sun News Network, Ezra? I can't remember. We had the mainstream of the Sun newspapers, but Sun News Network was definitely fighty. And so it's hard to see journalists being paid by the government. They shouldn't be. Yeah. That goes for left wing or right wing or space alien. You know, we don't care. Journalists should not be being paid by the government. And it's interesting, you were talking about journalists getting thrown out of political events and press conferences. You know, I thought you and I had it bad enough when we were getting tossed out of protests, when things would get hairy at Sun News Network. I never thought that we'd actually see official politicians getting mild-mannered reporters in trouble and saying that we're not going to speak to you. So this cancel culture siloed thing has really taken on a new life. And so hopefully, if we get the government funding of media canceled, they can hit a reset button and they can build back up and they can get subscriptions and they can get voluntary support and donations. And maybe that'll clear things up.
Hey, Kris, what do you think the number one issue in this campaign has been? I think it's been the civil liberties questions about the lockdowns and the vaccines. And I know at least the left has tried to make that. And by that, I mean the media and the NDP. You're with the Taxpayers Federation. Do you think issues like the carbon tax and the war on fossil fuels, do you think that got enough ink and airtime? Or did the media party sort of ignore that because they know it would benefit the United Conservative Party? What's your take on how taxes were treated?
I didn't see a lot of coverage, to be fair, about things like the carbon tax. However, I did see quite a bit of coverage when Rachel Notley made her announcement that they were going to suddenly jack up the corporate tax rate from 8% to 11%. And maybe that's because it came out of her own mouth and it was during an official press conference. And so it just rolled with it that way. But I saw a lot of press coverage that way. Now, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, we've been around since 1990. As you said in your podcast a couple of days ago, even former Premier Jason Kenney used to have my job as the Alberta director. And so our supporters are in the thousands, and there are a lot of them are in Alberta. The main thing they tell me is affordability. And that includes things like their fuel prices, their food prices, and how much it costs them to open up shop and do business. And so that's why we've really focused on this, on balancing the budget, making sure you're fighting against Trudeau's carbon tax, and making sure things are more affordable. For the first time, Ezra, I got to say, I've had a spike in people phoning me who are working class, they're working jobs. These folks are hardworking, but they're using food banks. That's really disturbing to hear. And so the carbon tax does make food cost more because, of course, everything that's shipped to you on a train or a truck uses diesel. And diesel, of course, has Justin Trudeau's carbon tax on it. And he's going to triple it. So, yeah, as far as our supporters go here in Alberta, the affordability stuff was right up here. I think it got a reasonable amount of play, but there was a little bit too much of the back and forth fluffy stuff I found.
I want to hand you over to my friend Sheila Gunnree because, of course, she's really plugged in these issues. Sheila, go ahead.
Well, I wanted to talk to Kris a little bit about my beloved friend Kris, by the way, whom I don't get to talk to enough. There are other ways that the government subsidizes media instead of just doing it directly. For example, in Alberta in 2015, 2016, 2017, as media was contracting in the legislature press gallery, those journalists were going directly to work for the government. They were becoming issues managers, they were becoming press secretaries, and they are not saying a word when people like Kian Bexy or Alex Dhaliwal of Rebel News or Adam Sos of Rebel News are getting tossed out of NDP events. Cheryl Oates works in communications on the Notley's campaign. She was with Global. John Archer, although he's no longer with the NDP and he's got some problems lately, he was with CBC. He was instrumental in blocking us. There are so many journalists working for the NDP and they aren't speaking up. And you would expect that they would. And I ask you this as a journalist, but also someone who cares about the bloated size and scope of a journalist. What do we do here?
I think actually this has to require conversations that are one-on-one and private. Mm-hmm. And you need to just tell them, hey, you got to do the right thing here. Now, I can speak to this taking off my CTF hat and speaking as a journalist, a longtime journalist, and somebody who's worked and jumped over the fence to work in communications, to be perfectly fair. We all used to kind of stick up for each other, right? So to give you an example, when I was at Sun News Network, I was working on Parliament Hill. I was a member of the Parliamentary Press Gallery. I was going to be going into a private event that still had a lot of speakers and stuff at it. I think it was a Manning event with Preston Manning, and the current Prime Minister, Stephen Harper, was there. And I was standing there next to Katie, who is this little reporter for the Hill Times. We probably vote differently, but she's always been polite. She's always been friendly to me, and we just respected each other as colleagues. We're about to go through the door, and the kid at the door said, okay, you can come in, Kris, but Katie, you're not allowed. And I said, the hell you're not. This is a Parliamentary Press Gallery sponsored event. It says it's open to media, right? Yes, but she's not allowed. I said, why? Oh, cuz. So it's supposed to be that you stick up for each other. Now, there are exceptions. If you are disrupting press conferences and hurling swear words and invectives, of course, don't act like a jerk. But if you're there to ask tough questions and hold people to account, hello, that's your job. That's literally your job as a journalist. And so that used to be standard. And I don't know why that's changed. It shouldn't have changed. And so I really would encourage anyone who's still in mainstream media right now, reach across the aisle to the government side or the communication side and talk to those old friends of yours and say, hey, why are you not arguing for press freedom here in Canada? And again, I don't care if it's Rebel, my friends here at Rebel, or folks over at Canada Land, you deserve a right to hold the powerful to account. And that's the form of journalism.
I think the soft corruption of government money has a lot to do with why the media doesn't speak up.
Which is why you need to defund it. This is why, okay? This is why you need to defund the CBC. It's over $1 billion. This is why you need to defund the media, right? It's around $500 billion or $500 million or so forth. Because again, the state shouldn't pay for journalism. It doesn't matter in which direction. They shouldn't be paying for journalism. I'll put it this way. I've given this analogy before. Picture yourself as a reporter, even like a smaller newspaper reporter, and $13,000 of your salary comes from Justin Trudeau's government. Okay? You're up on Parliament Hill. You're a member of the press gallery. Are you going to chase those cabinet ministers down hallways and ask tough questions, potentially embarrassing questions, when you know, your brain knows that a huge chunk of your salary is coming from that cabinet? You can't. You can't. No human being would be expected to be able to do so. And even Andrew Coyne, who's very mainstream, has said this is an obvious conflict of interest. And so it has to be stopped.
Hey, Kris, thanks so much for joining us. It's great to catch up with you. And it's fun to have you joining us from the offices of the Western Standard. Give our regards to Derek and the team out there, and keep fighting for freedom. You know, I always boast about the Taxpayers Federation. And earlier in our conversation tonight, we talked about the importance of crowdfunding, because it means you're beholden to no one. There's no hidden hand. And the Taxpayers Federation, like Rebel News, has a policy: never take government money. I don't know if you use the word crowdfunding as much as we do. That's just a phrase we use. And that's the reason I trust you and your colleagues, because I know you, like us, work for the people. And that's why everyone respects the Taxpayers Federation. They know you're in no one's pocket. All the best to you and the team, my friend. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Great studio. Congratulations on it.
Right on. Thank you for that. Well, that's a friendly compliment.